the time,
Your process, it sounds like your work is sort of a compulsion. Your visuals, like when you sit down, do you sketch? Do you have a journal where you write down ideas, or is your art making process your journal? Are these things coming from the top of your head, or have you kind of thought about things ahead of time and like, you know what, I'd like to put this with that and see how it goes?
I have uh, I have a stack of pages which I have notes to, and there there's a words, and then there's a visual counterpart, and there's an open space between those. They can there's no ground rules of what becomes a finished work, whether whether it starts with the words or the visual. And on the other hand, for the last couple of years or so, I haven't consulted my notes at all, so it's been on the spot, improvise isn't the word really, but there's, like you said before, there's certain images that I keep going back to, but then there's images that come out of left field. I mean, they may be found images of some sort, or not. But then every picture tells a story, right? Eventually, I can make sense of it. The words can make sense of the drawing. The drawing can make sense of the words.
It's funny, as I hear you describe that process, in a lot of ways you sound like a songwriter, right? In terms of a songwriter is is working with, there's like the one side that's melody and the other side that's lyrics. Here it's a visual and the prose. Do you ever put words together with images that it isn't exactly a direct connection, where there's a little bit more cognitive dissonance in between, for your own sake or for the sake of the viewer's share, to try to figure out how they go together? Or do they usually go hand in hand?
I think there is a cognitive dissonance, and at times, and probably for the most part, that's not to say it's just randomly applied. There is a reason why it is that way. Though I don't owe an explanation to anyone, and that's part of even in like New Yorker cartoons. They can come through a convoluted route, although it's, with a minimum of information. My work as well sometimes, for the most part, perhaps, but it becomes conclusive, or ends somewhat. It can be left hanging as well a little bit, but there's a punchline, and they're similar in ways, but they're much different. And I respect the medium and the process. And you're right, it is, the process anyways can be somewhat similar. And as far as that goes, to writing songs as well, of which I've written many. No one's ever heard of them because I don't. Well, I've done many records, but the general public doesn't know. But
Will the public know one day?
oh, who knows? I don't have any expectations of that sort. So I've pretty much been rewriting the American Songbook, and that falls on deaf ears anyway.
I think a lot of people consider you much a writer, writing as an art just as much as visual imagery as an art. And I think a lot of people think of you as a writer. Have you compiled your writings before? Have you published your written work?
There's a very scarcity of that. that I've even done, published. And the reason is, and this is kind of self-conjecture on my part, but the writing, whether it's songs or animation, film, drawings, paintings, I'm okay with that. Of course, the writing part is on display, but the work needs both. It needs physical accompaniment, or and over the years, and I've been at this a long time. I've been okay with the way I work, and I haven't built any great need to. I don't gain anything by losing one or the other, and it's very seldom that a work won't have both. Sometimes they don't, but if it's plain words, and once it's put on a wall and framed, with a frame or without it, it's still the same pretty much. It contextualizes it as visual art, I guess.
I know that you do paintings and drawings. I mean, I think a lot of times you work with a brush, but it feels like a drawing because, again, the mark making. But you also do a number of collages these days. Is that just your way of repurposing work that was either an unfinished thought or an unfinished image, and your ability to bring it back to life in a new way? Or, are the collages more thought out ahead of time than that?
It can't be, I wouldn't really say it's repurposing it, although it can be that, but it's not. God knows I don't have a lack of material, so it's not as if I'm playing catch up or cutting corners by doing collages. It's the associations between images. Well, any given drawing I've done there, it does imply, I would think it doesn't just stay there. It may be you could say it could be the equivalent of a still from a film, but whether you've seen the film in total or not, or it's out of time, but nothing is truly out of time. The most minimal of works are done in a context or social order, or with a date on the wall, and an author.
Do you feel like there's any sort of misconceptions about you or your work? Do you feel that you're misunderstood in any way?
Once it's done, it finds its own place, and it's pretty much out there for. And there's misconceptions, I suppose, with no one. I assume, I may be wrong, but no one wants to be completely understood, because that's impossible. If you, at least with my work, you'd have to live my life and my study and background to have the beginnings of reading it as I would. And there's no correct way of reading it anyway, and that would include myself. And it's not something I don't prep or coach the reader or the critic, or I don't try to. I just don't go there. Where I stand in the history of art or whatever. Those are that diminishes the work to be summed up that easily or explained that easily. the critics or Wikipedia sum it up and let it go at that. I hope that's not the case.
Do you have any upcoming projects or shows that are on the horizon where people can find your work?
I haven't been working much lately. I kind of brought that up, I think, before, but I've had some physical problems with my knees and my drawing hand, which that'll pass. But so and even before that, I wouldn't say I've taken a break, because taking a break has been harder than not working. But it was just circumstances that it's been kind of disheartening, to my relationship to the art world and the people I who look at and appreciate and my work. I have utmost appreciation for them, but it's taken on some unwanted and unsavory manifestations that leave a bit disheartened and questioning, what the hell I ever started doing this in the first place for. That's being too dramatic about it. I know, but nevertheless,
I hope that your knees and hand get better because I know that's a real drag. But if folks that love your work, your contribution to the world of art, if they wanted to keep track of you, where would it be best for people to follow your comings and goings?
Unfortunately, I'm not. It's been a couple of years or so since I've been on Twitter, and I'm not on Facebook either. And there is an Instagram, which I have nothing to do with. So I don't know. I mean, for current updates and so forth, there's not much, but that doesn't count for much, or wouldn't account for much, even if I did have daily news. Or I think the body of my work is fairly available, like online through the galleries or whatever, and books as well. As far as day to day or last week, there's not much. But then, like I said, I'm not really in touch with that lately. I'm on the DL or the injured list, like LeBron and whoever.
Right.
Sitting out this World Series.
Raymond, I really appreciate your time this morning. I hope you get off the DL soon. I really appreciate you being willing to open up and answer all my unsolicited questions. I love your work. I love your vision, and again, I really appreciate your time this morning.
Well, I appreciate yours, and it's been really good talking to you on my day.
Hey, I appreciate it. I'll let you go. And now, the news. The conversation about ill-gotten antiquities and the prospects of restitution continues to bubble up week after week, and the British Museum is in the middle of the fray again, which isn't entirely shocking. The institution was created to showcase cultural artifacts from around the world in a time when Britain's foreign policy was more about colonization and less about diplomacy. This week, Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis called for the return of the Parthenon marbles that have resided at the British Museum for more than 200 years. He stated this week that he will discuss the issue when he sits down with UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Wednesday of this week. Mitsotakis was quoted in the Daily Telegraph this week as saying, "Our position is very clear. The marbles were stolen in the 19th century, they belong in the Acropolis Museum, and we need to discuss this issue in earnest." However, Johnson told the Greek newspaper Tanea the UK government has a firm, long-standing position on the sculptures, which is that they were legally acquired by Lord Elgin under the appropriate laws of the time and have been legally owned by the British Museum's trustees since their acquisition.